That pool is community property now, and people like you don't get a key. That was Brenda Hollis, president of the Mesa Springs Homeowners Association, for 11 years, standing on the pool deck of an amenity my family had paid into for 2 decades, telling me my access card had been deactivated. The pool sat at the center of our development, outside Carson Ridge, Arizona, and my late wife had served on the committee that built it. What Brenda did not know was that the title to the parcel under that pool and the water rights that fed it had a wrinkle in them that no board in 11 years had bothered to read. I am a retired civil hydrologist. I spent 31 years designing water systems, and I keep every record I have ever touched. So when a woman in a coral blazer told me my family didn't get a key, I did not raise my voice. I went home and opened a folder. What would you have done? Standing there with your daughter beside you and a deactivated card in your hand. My name is Ray Calloway. I am 62 years old. I spent my career as a civil hydrologist, which means I spent 3 decades studying where water comes from, who owns it, and what a piece of paper says about both. I have stood in irrigation ditches in 4 states with a clipboard and a transit, and I have testified in front of water boards where men in good suits learned, in real time, that a recorded date beats a confident opinion every single day of the week. I live on a half-acre lot at the edge of the Mesa Springs development, a place my wife Diane and I bought in 2001, when the streets were still gravel and the community pool was a hole in the ground with rebar sticking out of it. We paid $184,000 for the lot and the little house on it, and we thought we were being reckless. Diane stood in that gravel the first day with the wind blowing her hair across her face and said, "This is the one," and she was right. The way she was right about most things. Diane sat on the original amenities committee. She helped pick the tile, a plain blue that the contractor said was boring and she said would still look right in 30 years, and it does. She raised the money for the shade structures. She read every contract that crossed that committee because she had been a paralegal for 19 years before Casey was born, and she never lost the habit of reading the thing all the way to the end. That habit is half of why I'm telling you this story. The other half is that she is gone now, 4 years this spring. An aneurysm on an ordinary Tuesday with no warning at all, and the house is quieter than I ever thought a house could be. My daughter Casey is 16. She swims. She has swum at that pool since she was 3 years old, and her mother taught her there, holding her under the arms in the shallow end, while Casey kicked and shrieked, and the blue tile threw light up under both their chins. I want to tell you the whole thing in order because the order is the point. People hear the ending and think it was luck. It was not luck. It was filing. When we bought in, the development was run loosely. There was a board, but it was 3 retirees who met twice a year over coffee and mostly argued about whether to repaint the entrance sign. The pool was open dawn to dusk. You walked up, you swam, nobody checked a card because there were no cards. Kids rode bikes down to it with towels around their necks. On the 4th of July, the whole development crowded onto that deck, and somebody always brought a smoker, and the smell of it hung over the water until dark. That was the place we bought into. That changed when Brenda Hollis bought the big house on the ridge in 2009 and ran for president the following spring. She won by 4 votes. She has not lost an election since. She learned that if you control the mailing list and the meeting schedule and the proxy forms, you do not have to win arguments. You only have to outlast the people who have jobs. I did not pay much attention to her at first. I was working, traveling for contracts, gone 3 weeks at a stretch to a reservoir project in Nevada, or a recharge study down near the border, And Diane handled the community side of our lives the way she handled most things, with patience and a casserole. She and Brenda were not friends, exactly, but they were civil. And Diane told me once that Brenda was the kind of woman who needed to be in charge of something, or she came apart, and that the pool committee was a small enough thing to let her have. I think about that now. Diane had read Brenda correctly, years before I ever had to. Brenda's husband, Doug Hollis, ran a company called Vista Land Partners. He built the second and third phases of Mesa Springs, the ones up the hill with the bigger lots and the fake stacked stone entrances, and he had ambitions for a fourth phase, out past the wash, on raw acreage he had taken an option on. I knew that the way you know, background noise. I filed it and forgot it. A man building houses near you is not a crime. It only became one when I understood what he needed from a swimming pool. The first letter came in March of 2022. It was a notice of a new amenities policy printed on heavy paper with the association seal, informing all residents that pool access would now require a registered key card tied to an account in good standing. Fine. I registered. I paid the fee. Casey and I got our cards, and we kept swimming. I noticed the language in the policy was strange. It referred to the pool as a privately managed community asset, under board discretion. I noticed it the way I notice a hairline crack in a concrete pour. I did not say anything. I made a copy, and I put it in a manila folder labeled Mesa Springs, and I wrote the date on the tab. That folder is the whole story. Everything I am about to tell you went into it. The second escalation came that summer. The board posted new pool hours cut by a third and announced that the pool would be closed for private events on certain weekends. The first private event was a fundraiser for a city council candidate. The candidate was a man named Phil Arness, and Phil Arness sat on the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission was the body that would have to approve Doug Hollis's fourth phase. I watched 200 people I had never seen before park along our streets and drink wine at a pool my dues maintained, white tents on the deck, a man in a vest pouring from bottles, a banner with Arness's name strung between the shade structures Diane had raised the money for. Casey wanted to know why we could not swim that day. I did not have a good answer for her that a 16-year-old would accept. I went home and wrote it down. Date, time, the name on the banner, the license plate of the catering van. Into the folder. You should know something about me. At this point, I do not get angry the way other people do. My pulse goes up, my jaw sets, my hands get very still. Diane used to say I got quiet like a held breath. When the situation is bad, I get organized. It is the only thing that has ever worked for me, and it is the thing my whole career trained into me, because you cannot shout at an aquifer and you cannot intimidate a water table. You can only measure it and record it and be right. So while my neighbors complained on the community message board and accomplished nothing, threads 40 comments long that changed not one thing, I built a record. I requested the association's governing documents. I requested the original plat. I requested the recorded easements. Under Arizona law, a member has the right to inspect those records, and I sent the request by certified mail so there would be a receipt with a green card that came back with a date stamped on it. The board took 41 days to respond. The law allows 10. I noted that too, the gap between the two numbers, because a body that drags its feet on a simple records request is usually a body with something it does not want read. What came back was incomplete. They sent me the bylaws and a marked-up site map, the kind of thing you could pull off the community website, but not the recorded plat, and not the easement documents I had specifically named by instrument. I sent a second request, more specific, citing the statute by section. 11 days later, they sent a letter from the association's attorney, a man named Kurt Vane, suggesting that my requests were becoming burdensome and that continued correspondence of this nature. I read that letter twice, standing at my kitchen counter with my reading glasses pushed down my nose. A board does not pay a lawyer to write a harassment letter over a map you could find online. It pays a lawyer to make a man stop looking. So I did the opposite of stopping. I drove to the county recorder's office in Carson Ridge on a Monday morning, and I pulled the documents myself because recorded instruments are public, and a board cannot unrecord what was recorded. That was the day the whole thing cracked open, though I did not say a word to anyone for almost a year. Here is what I found at the county counter. And here is what Brenda Hollis never checked. The clerk who helped me was a patient woman who had been pulling instruments for 30 years, and when I told her the lot number, she brought up the original plat on a flat screen and printed it on a long sheet that smelled of warm toner. The pool parcel, Lot 007, in the original Mesa Springs plat, was not owned by the Homeowners Association. It had been deeded in 2001 to a separate entity called the Mesa Springs Recreation Trust, a small nonprofit set up by the original developer to hold the amenity and the water that fed it. The association managed the pool under a maintenance agreement, a service contract, nothing more. It did not own it. It had never owned it. And the water. This is the part that mattered. The water came from a well with a grandfathered irrigation right that predated the development by 60 years. A right recorded in 1941 to a cattle operation that once ran the whole basin before the houses ever came. Water rights in Arizona run with seniority, and seniority runs with the date on the paper, and 1941 beats everything else in that valley by a wide margin. When the developer set up the trust in 2001, he assigned that senior water right to the trust, and the trust's founding documents named its trustees. There were 3. I read the names. 2 had a small cross penciled beside them in the margin of a later filing, the recorder's shorthand for deceased. The 3rd, the only living trustee with authority over Lot 007, and the water that filled the pool was listed by name in a recorded amendment from 2003. The name was Diane Calloway, my wife. The trust had asked her to serve because she had run the amenities committee, and she had signed the paper. And she had never mentioned it because to her it was a formality, one more volunteer hat in a life full of them. When she died, her authority did not evaporate. It passed, under the trust instrument and under her will, to her estate. To me. I sat in my truck in the county parking lot for a long time. Then I made 3 copies of everything, put one in the folder, mailed one to a safe deposit box, and scanned one to a drive I keep at the house and a second drive I keep at my brother's. I did not call a lawyer yet. I did not tell the board. I had learned a long time ago that you do not show a card until the table is set. What she did not know was that the pool she had closed to my daughter ran on water my dead wife controlled. I just had to wait for Brenda to commit all the way to a position she could not climb down from. She obliged me, step by step, over the next 11 months. It was a Tuesday in September when the access card stopped working. Casey called me from the pool gate. Her voice came in pieces over the phone, the way a kid's does when she is embarrassed and angry at the same time. Dad, it won't. The light's red. There's a lady. She says we have to. She says she's calling someone. I told Casey to come straight home. Do not argue. Do not stand there. And I drove down to the pool myself with the truck windows down and my hands very still on the wheel. That is where this story started, with Brenda Hollis in a coral blazer telling me, People like me don't get a key. Standing on a pool deck. My dues had maintained for 20 years in front of the blue tile my wife had picked. Behind her, near the fence, a sheriff's deputy stood with her thumbs hooked in her belt because Brenda had called the county and reported a disturbance before I had said a single word to anyone. The deputy's name was Sandra Ruiz. She was young, careful, and visibly uncomfortable with the whole arrangement. A uniformed officer dispatched to a swimming pool over an access card. She took me aside, away from Brenda, and told me quietly that the association had filed a trespass notice and that she had to take it seriously, regardless of what she personally thought of it. She also told me even more quietly, almost under her breath, that if I believed I had a property claim, I should document everything and bring it through the proper channel, because in her experience a paper claim was the only thing that ever changed a situation like this one. She was telling me how to win without being allowed to say so. I thanked her. I did not raise my voice at Brenda. I turned around and drove home, and I sat at the kitchen table and added the date and the deputy's name and the words on the trespass notice to the folder. That made 9 documented incidents, and it was the first one with a deputy's name attached, which meant the county was now a witness, whether it wanted to be or not. Let me tell you about the staircase, because each step matters, and each step was a number. In 2022, there were 2 incidents: the access policy and the cut hours. In the spring of 2023, the board levied the first fine against me, $400, for what they called unauthorized use of a community asset, after Casey swam during one of the new restricted windows on a Saturday afternoon. The notice came on the heavy paper with the seal. I did not pay it. I did not call to argue. I made a copy, wrote the date on it, and filed it. That was incident 3. In June, they doubled it to $800 and added a threat to place a lien on my house, which is a serious thing to put in a letter. A lien on a man's home over a swimming pool, and the seriousness of it told me they did not expect anyone to read it carefully. I read it carefully. Incident 4. In July, a man in a polo shirt with a clipboard and a laminated badge showed up at my gate, claiming to be a community compliance inspector, and demanded to photograph my backyard for covenant violations. He had the posture of a man who had never been told no by a homeowner. I asked to see his credentials. The badge was laminated, the kind you print at home, with a logo and a number and a website printed across the bottom. I typed the website into my phone while he stood there. It sold badges, $40 for a pack of 10. I recorded the entire exchange on my phone, told him he was standing on private property, and that I had his image and his fake badge on video, and watched him decide, fast, that my backyard was not worth it. He left. Incident 5, and I had it on 2 drives by that night. In August, Brenda escalated in a way that told me what this had really been about all along. She held a board meeting, packed it with her people, the upper phase owners who voted however she asked because she controlled the architectural committee that approved their additions, and she proposed that the association formally absorb the recreation amenities, the pool and the surrounding 2 acres, into a new community improvement district. I sat in the back of that meeting in a folding chair, and I listened. A community improvement district can issue bonds. It can levy assessments against every house in the development. And the engineering study attached to the proposal, which I took home in the public packet and read line by line at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning, called for the existing pool to be demolished and replaced with a larger aquatic center as the anchor amenity for Phase 4. Doug Hollis's Phase 4. The same phase that needed Planning Commission approval from a body that included Phil Arness, the candidate whose fundraiser had been held at our pool the summer before. I sat there with the study open under the kitchen light, and I felt the whole thing rotate into place like a survey, finally closing on itself. The petty tyranny over a swimming pool was never about the swimming pool. It was about controlling the parcel and the senior water right under it. So, a development worth tens of millions could be built on the back of both. I want to be fair to Brenda Hollis, because the story does not work if she is a cartoon, and because the truth is more useful than a villain. She believed she was right. She had run this place for 11 years, and nobody had ever made her check a fact, because nobody had ever had standing to make her. She had confused tenure for ownership and confidence for title. She said in that August meeting on the record, with the secretary typing minutes, that the pool and the land under it were functionally part of the association's jurisdiction and always had been. She said it twice, the second time louder, when a younger homeowner raised his hand and asked mildly whether the association actually held the deed. She did not answer the question. She repeated the word functionally and moved to the next item. She also said that residents who could not get with the community vision were welcome to sell and move on. She looked right at me when she said it, across that room. The way you look at someone you have already decided does not matter. I wrote it down word for word, because a recorded public statement made into a microphone in front of witnesses is worth more than 100 private grievances. And I had a feeling I would want it later. There was a woman on that board named Lottie Pearl, 70 years old, who had been Diane's friend. She voted yes on everything Brenda wanted because she was afraid of her, and afraid of the lawyer, and afraid of being the only no. After that August meeting, though, she walked out to the parking lot and found me and put her hand on my arm and said, "Ray, this isn't right, and I don't know how to stop it." I told her she did not have to stop it. I told her she only had to be willing when the time came to tell the truth about what she had seen in that room. She nodded. She was crying a little. I added her name to a separate page in the folder, the page where I kept the people who would help when it mattered. The improvement district proposal needed county approval. There would be a public hearing before the Board of Supervisors in October, and the Planning Commission would weigh in. Doug Hollis's company had already submitted preliminary plans for Phase 4 contingent on the new amenity. Money was moving. I could see the shape of it now, the whole machine, and I understood that the access card being shut off was not the end of an argument. It was Brenda clearing the board so the real game could be played. She needed the parcel and the water to look like association property in front of the county. They were not association property. They were trust property, and the trust's living trustee was a dead woman whose authority I now held. In September, the month the card died, I finally called an attorney, a property specialist named Hank Doyle, who worked out of a low brick office in Carson Ridge and had pulled 1,000 chains of title in his life. His waiting room had a coffee maker that did not work and a wall of leather books nobody had opened in years. I laid the whole folder on his desk. 3 years of it, in order, with the tabs dated. He read for 2 hours without saying much, just the sound of pages turning and the occasional grunt. Then he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose and said, "Ray, do you understand what you have here?" I said I thought I did. He said the association had spent 2 years issuing fines, threats, and trespass notices over a parcel it did not own, and was now petitioning the county to absorb a senior water right it had no claim to. He said, "In 30 years I've never seen a board hand demand this much rope." Then he said the thing that set the plan. He said the cleanest path was not a lawsuit, because a lawsuit would take 3 years and let them settle quietly and bury it. The cleanest path was simply to show up at the October hearing and put the recorded instruments in front of the supervisors in public. Because once the chain of title was read aloud into a public record, the improvement district could not stand. The county cannot grant an association jurisdiction over land and water that a trust holds and a private estate controls. He said, "You do not need to win an argument. You need to let them finish making theirs, and then you hand the clerk 3 pieces of paper." So that became the plan. Not a confrontation, a hearing. And here is the part people always ask me about. The part that sounds like a movie, but was really just hydrology. While Brenda was lining up her bond district and her renderings, I quietly took the trust's senior water right and put it to work the only honest way I knew. There was a shuttered family water park 2 miles down the road, off the state route, the kind of place with faded slides and an empty wave pool that had closed when the owner retired, and nobody wanted the liability. It sat on land that drew from the same basin as our well. The thing it lacked, the thing that had killed every buyer before me, was a secure senior water allocation in a valley where junior rights got cut first in a dry year. The trust held exactly that. So the trust acquired the water park at a distressed price, perfected the allocation, and reopened it. And every family in Mesa Springs whose pool access Brenda had been rationing suddenly had a full water park down the street that the trust ran at cost, on water she had spent 3 years trying to seize. She had closed a pool to control a parcel. She had handed the whole neighborhood somewhere better to swim, and she had done it by teaching me to read my own deed. I did not say any of this at the time. I just bought the park, opened the gates, and waited for October. The week before the hearing, the harassment got worse, because Brenda could feel something coming and did not know what shape it was. A contractor's truck idled outside my house twice. A man in the cab who did not get out just sat there with the engine running for 20 minutes both times, until I walked out onto the porch with my phone raised and read his plate aloud, and then he left. A second fraudulent fine arrived, this one for $1,100, citing an ordinance number that did not exist. And on the Thursday before the hearing, Casey called me again from the pool, where she had gone with 2 friends to sit on the deck because it was the last warm week of the year and they wanted one more afternoon. And a man Brenda had hired to manage the property told all 3 girls to leave, and then stood in the gate with his arms folded so they could not pass. 3 teenage girls and a deck full of younger kids and a grown man blocking the only exit. Casey's voice came through the phone in fragments again. "Dad? He won't let us out. He's just standing there. There are little kids here too, and he's not letting anybody." I drove down. I did not raise my voice when I got there. I told the man he was free to call the deputy, and then I called her myself. And Deputy Ruiz came out and stood in the middle of it the way she had before, constrained, neutral, doing her job, telling both sides to keep it calm. This time, though, I handed her a single sheet of paper. It was the recorded amendment naming the trustee, the 2003 filing, with Diane's name on it. I told her I was not asking her to settle anything today. I was asking her to note in her report that a property claim had been formally presented at the scene. She read it, slowly, all the way down. She looked up at the man in the gate and then at me. And something in her posture shifted the way a person shifts when the ground they thought was solid turns out to belong to someone else. She wrote it down in her notebook, the instrument number and the date. That was incident 14, and it was the last one I would ever need. The hearing was on a Wednesday morning in the county building in Carson Ridge. The room had wooden benches. and a raised dais where 5 supervisors sat, and a podium with a microphone for public comment. Brenda came in a new blazer, this one a hard magenta, with Doug beside her in a sport coat, and Kurt Vane, the attorney, carrying a leather folio. They had a slide presentation. They had renderings of the new aquatic center, blue and gleaming with families superimposed on the deck. Phil Arness sat at the planning commission table to the side. Lottie Pearl sat near the back, alone, her hands folded in her lap. Casey sat beside me. She wore the necklace her mother left her. Brenda spoke first. She was good. She talked about community vision and shared amenities and the future of Mesa Springs, and she said, for the third time in this story, and the third separate setting, that the recreation parcel was functionally part of the association's jurisdiction. She said it into a live microphone, into the public record, in front of 5 county supervisors. Then she yielded the floor, and the chair asked if any member of the public wished to speak. I walked to the podium. My hands were very still. I did not give a speech. I have never been any good at speeches, and the story does not need one. I said my name. I said I was a resident of Mesa Springs and the personal representative of the estate of Diane Calloway. I said I had 3 recorded documents I wished to enter into the record, and I asked the clerk to mark them. The first was the original 2001 plat, showing Lot 007 deeded to the Mesa Springs Recreation Trust, not the association. The second was the 1941 water right, grandfathered, assigned to the trust in 2001. The third was the 2003 recorded amendment, naming the trustees of that trust, with 2 now deceased, and the third, the sole surviving trustee of record, being Diane Calloway, whose authority passed to her estate upon her death, and now rested with me. The room got very quiet. I laid the 3 sheets on the clerk's table. I did not look at Brenda. I looked at the chair of the supervisors, a woman named Pat Munoz who had spent 20 years in county government and had read more recorded instruments than anyone in that room. She took the documents. She put on her glasses. She read the plat, then the water right, then the amendment. She read the amendment twice. Then she set them down and looked at the county's own counsel, who had come up beside her, and the 2 of them spoke in low voices for almost a full minute, while nobody in the room said anything at all. I watched Brenda's face during that minute. I am not proud of how closely I watched it, but I had earned that minute. It started confident. Then it went still. Then it went the color of the paper on the table. Doug Hollis leaned toward the attorney, and the attorney was already shaking his head, fast, the way a man shakes his head, when he realizes he is the one who should have checked. Pat Munoz took off her glasses. She said for the record that the parcel identified as Lot 007 was titled to a trust, not to the Homeowners Association, and that the water right serving it was held by that same trust, and that the improvement district as petitioned could not be approved over property the petitioner did not own or control. She said the matter was not properly before the board. She said it kindly, the way professionals deliver bad news. Then she asked, into the microphone, whether the surviving trustee of records representative was present. She asked, did the trust intend to grant the association control of the parcel? I said no. That was the whole reveal. 3 sheets of paper and 1 word. No shouting. No speech. The document spoke, and a neutral authority read it aloud. And a development built on a water right held by my late wife collapsed in the time it took an experienced county clerk to read an amendment twice. The consequences fell exactly where Brenda had pointed them. The improvement district died at that table and was never refiled. Without the new aquatic center as its anchor amenity, Phase 4 lost its financing within 60 days because the lender had underwritten the deal on the assumption that the association controlled the parcel and the water, and when that assumption came apart in the public record, so did the loan. Vista Land Partners defaulted on the option it had taken on the upper acreage, forfeiting the deposit, which I later learned was somewhere north of $400,000. Doug Hollis's company filed for protection from its creditors the following spring. Phil Arness, who had let a planning matter be steered by a fundraiser at a pool he did not own, withdrew from his re-election in the face of an ethics inquiry that the county opened on its own once the recorded statements entered the public file, because a public file is a public file and other people read it too. And Brenda Hollis, who had stood on a pool deck and told the man whose wife built that pool that people like him don't get a key, faced a special recall vote of the membership that winter. The neighbors she had counted on to never read a document had read this one, because it had been in the newspaper, and because Lottie Pearl had stood up at the next association meeting and told the room, plainly and without notes, what she had watched happen over 3 years. The tally was the number that I think about most. In 11 years, Brenda had never lost an election. She lost the recall by a margin of 147 to 19. After 11 years of running the place, 19 people still stood with her, and that, more than any of it, was the measure of what she had built. I never collected $1 from her. I never filed a single fine, never sent a single threatening letter, never put a lien on anyone's house. My record across 3 years showed 0 fines paid and 14 incidents documented, each with a date and a copy. Hers showed thousands of dollars in legal bills, 2 collapsed developments, a forfeited option deposit, and a presidency ended by her own neighbors. The gap between those 2 numbers is the whole point, and I did not have to say a word of it out loud. The paper said it. It had been saying it since 1941. It had just been waiting in a drawer at the county for someone to walk in and ask. The trust still holds. Lot Z. Ray. Yo. 7. I serve as trustee now, the way Diane did, and I did the thing she would have done, which was to open the pool back up, dawn to dusk, no cards, the way it was when we bought in and the streets were still gravel and a kid could ride a bike down with a towel around his neck and just swim. Lottie Pearl runs the amenities committee. She is not afraid of anyone anymore. She put the blue tile back in the maintenance plan, the boring blue Diane fought for, and she told me it would still look right in another 30 years. And she did not know she was quoting my wife. And I did not tell her. Casey swims there most mornings before school, laps in the cool early light before the deck fills up. A few weeks after the hearing, she came in dripping, dropped her towel on the kitchen floor, the way she always does, and I always tell her not to, her hair stuck to her neck, and her eyes still pink from the water. She stood there a second longer than usual. Then she said, "Mom would have liked that you didn't yell." I had to look at the coffee maker for a moment before I could answer her. I told her that her mother taught me everything I know about not yelling. She laughed, a short, surprised laugh, and she picked up the towel without being asked, which she had not done in about 3 years. The house was a little less quiet that day, and a little less quiet most days since. I kept the folder. It sits on the shelf in my office, with the date on the tab. I do not need it anymore, but I keep it, because it is the thing that won, and because a record is the only honest thing in a fight like this one. Everything else is just people talking. So here is the practical part, the part I actually want you to take with you, because the satisfaction of the story is worth nothing if you do not get the lesson out of it. If an association or a board or any clipboard authority tells you that something is theirs, do not argue with them. Go to the county recorder and pull the deed yourself. Recorded instruments are public, and a board cannot unrecord what was recorded. Read your plat. Find out who actually owns the parcel, the road, the well, the easement. Verify the deed against the ground, foot by foot if you have to. When a letter arrives, do not answer it with anger. Make a copy, write the date on it, and put it in a folder. Keep the folder. Send your important requests by certified mail, so there is a receipt, and note the date they were due and the date they actually came. If they cut you off from something, find out whether they had the right to, and if they did not, let them keep escalating until they have committed all the way to a position the record can knock down in one motion. You do not win these fights by shouting across a fence. You win them by reading the paper that was filed before either of you got there, and by being the one person in the room who bothered to check. If you have a story like this, a board that overstepped, a fight you won or lost, or are still in the middle of, tell me about it. I read every one. If this was worth your time, subscribe because I have more of these. And the next one is about a man whose HOA tried to charge him for a road they did not build until he found the easement his grandfather signed in. Until then, pull your deed. Read it. Keep the folder.